It's time for New York City Baseball, past, present, and future.
We're back, remembering baseball in New York baseball, as a matter of fact. Past, present, and future. My co-host is Wayne Unger. I'm Ralph Tyko. We have a special guest, Wayne Broadham, and he's doing some terrific producing. He doesn't even know it yet, just how talented he is. And this show is going to give us an opportunity to see that. Wayne, take it away, my man.
How you doing, everybody? Tonight we have Dan Szymborski of Sabermetrics fame. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys tonight?
Oh, we're terrific.
So I'll tell you. Let's go right into it. Okay, Dan, you are very well known for a baseball projection system that you named Zips. How did you come about? Saying, hey, you know what? I want to come up with a way. Were you inspired by Bill James? Did you think like, hey, you know what? I like that, but I'm going to build a better mousetrap, so to speak. How did it all come about?
Well, I was always a James fan, but the genesis of it was about 20 years ago in the late 90s now. A friend of mine, this pharmaceutical chemist named Chris Dial, he's on the board of Sabre now. Brilliant guy. We used to talk and say, hey, we could put together a projection system, and we could do a very simple one that would get us most of the way towards some of those secretive projection systems that you saw in fantasy magazines at the time. There weren't a lot of projections around the early internet at that point. But we never actually got around to our so-called simple system. A few years later, I was blogging about baseball transactions, and I was thinking, okay, well, let me think of those projections that we were talking about. I majored in math in college. I'm writing about baseball. A projection system might be a useful tool for someone who's writing about baseball transactions because, they're all about the future, so having a projection system is obviously fairly useful. So this was in 2002, and I spent the next couple years tinkering on and off, figuring out some things, and Zips was born. Now, Zips was a lot simpler then than what it became, but it was a good start. And over time, I'm happy with what it became.
Did you play fantasy baseball yourself? Is that why you were very much into projections?
I was always I didn't ever play a ton of fantasy. I played fantasy baseball because pretty much everybody interested in baseball at that point played fantasy. But I was really interested in sabermetrics. When I was a kid, my grandfather bought me the Bill James Baseball Abstracts and the Elias Baseball Analyst. So I was already fascinated by sabermetrics. And it was an early passion. At the time, I had already done some work with minor league translations and the like, and so then it wasn't a big stretch to tackle my own little projection system because I had some ideas of ways to do it, some newer research to implement, and it does seem to have worked out fairly well.
Did Gary Shandler influence your? And this will be my final question to you. Did Gary Shandler influence your writing or your belief system at all?
Ron Shandler definitely did. He wrote the Baseball Forecaster. Yeah, you're thinking of Gary Shandling. You got.
Yes, I am.
Remember Gary
the comedian.
I love Gary Shandling.
Terrific comedian, but Ron Shandling is.
Yeah, Ron Shandler. He was one of the people I read.
Analyst.
Yeah, he was. I was a little kid and I was reading these books. I was reading Ron Shandler and Pete Palmer and John Thorne and Bill James and of course the Eliases. And I wasn't even 10 yet. I was 8 and 9 and I was reading these things. So I was into sabermetrics for a very long time. I used to keep little notebooks where I would write sabermetric stats and I'd keep lists of things. Obviously spreadsheets work better for that, but when you're 7, paper works better.
Right.
Now, let me ask you something. So, have you ever gone back and have you ever done a study of how well your projections worked out, or how accurate they are?
Oh, every year I do, because that's the way you learn things. You learn things by making mistakes, and it's become refined over the years. I do well against Vegas. I beat Vegas last year and the year before. Obviously, we're doing different things. Vegas is trying to maximize money. I'm trying to maximize accuracy. But if you can keep around what Vegas is doing, then you'll do okay in the long run. I think I've also learned a lot from developing projections, because to write a projection system, you have to do a lot of studying of baseball and the various interplay of different things, such as estimating how fast a player is, how sluggers age, things like that. You build up an impressive knowledge base of some of these things. So it's been a fun journey, I would say.
And have you ever let's say you come across a certain player, have you ever have the numbers ever been spit out and you see the numbers but the eyeball test says, no, it's going to be wrong? Do you ever come across that? Do you ever not believe your own numbers, so to speak?
Oh, that happens all the time. There's always something you disbelieve, and you say there's no way that's true. And the funny thing is sometimes things I disbelieve turn out to be accurate, and the things that look just right turn out to be terrible. That's just the way it is. I let the projection system speak for itself, and I always make it clear in my columns that my opinion doesn't always agree with the projection system. And when I have a severe disagreement with the projection system or the projections that comes out, then I say why. And I underline why I think it might be wrong, and sometimes I'm right, and sometimes the computer's right. It's funny how it works out that way sometimes.
Okay.
Are there
what
players
about?
That excuse me, Wayne.
Go ahead, Ralph. It's okay. Go ahead,
I
Ralph.
was just going to ask whether or not there are players that surprise you, like they takes them a long time to come into their prime.
Well, it's funny. Some of the players that have confused the projection system are kind of the soft tossing pitchers, like Chris Young of the Royals, back the old Braves reliever Kevin Grybowski, which was the most random player for a projection system to have trouble with. But Kevin Grybowski always beat his projections. But there are always a number of surprises. And in the long run, the projection system does a good idea, because we're only peeking into the future. The future is very foggy, and we can only peer slightly into it. And really, if everything matched the projection, it wouldn't be much fun, would it?
No, it wouldn't. Tell me something. Is there enough data available? And if there is, have you ever gone back in the past a little bit and, let's say, take a Mickey Mantle at age 25 or even at age 22 and say, hey, you know what, based on the numbers I got up to this age, what would my system come up with for him? Have you ever done that?
Oh, I love those kind of what if things, because projections can give us information in all kinds of scenarios. It's not just how X player will do next up. I've done it with a number of players, especially players that have had their careers shortened due to injury. Like I've done Eric Davis after 1988. Just for ESPN, we were running a piece on some of the players that have had their careers cut short. I just did projections for Ted Williams' war years, Sandy Koufax after 1966, and Kirby Puckett after his glaucoma. So it's fun to look.
What about Bo Jackson? Did you ever do Bo Jackson?
I'm trying to remember if I did Bo Jackson. I must have done Bo Jackson at some point because I loved Bo Jackson, but I don't know it offhand. And I've done a lot of players.
Very interesting.
Oh, I loved Bo so much.
Yeah. Oh, now what about some of the other stats? What do you think personally of WAR, wins above replacement?
It's a rough tool. And the important thing about a stat is knowing when to use a stat also means when not to use a stat. Stats are tools. Like a hammer is a tool. A hammer is a very useful tool for a lot of situations, but there are always times where you need to know what a hammer does well, what a hammer doesn't. You're hammering a nail, hammer's a great tool. You're fixing a window, hammer's maybe not so great a tool. WAR does what it's supposed to. Sometimes people take it too seriously. Sometimes people don't take it seriously enough. It's all about having a balance and understanding what the data means.
Okay. What about, Ralph loves the old traditional OPS. where do
stat. It's not a perfect stat, but OPS is a very good estimate stat, essentially, because on-base percentage and slugging percentage are really the two primary determinants of how many runs a team will score. So even if it's a rough tool in the same way that WAR is a rough tool, it has a lot of usage. When you have a player with a 900 OPS and a player with a 750 OPS, unless there's some sort of weird situation like, say, one's in 1987 and the other's in 1910, that tells a lot about a player. Not every.
It would tell a lot about a pitcher if you used it in reverse. What's the OPS against the pitcher?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to use the most complex tool imaginable. OPS does a good job of what it does. It's when people start looking at it and saying a 755 OPS hitter is definitely better than a 750 OPS hitter. Then you're not really using the tool well. But these rough estimates you could do it in 5 seconds. You can add up on-base percentage and slugging percentage. You can't calculate runs created in your head like in 5 seconds. And speed's important, and so the ability to explain things.
How much of the computer do you use in your day-to-day thing, or do you actually sit down with a pen and pencil once in a while and a calculator yourself?
Well, I don't use pen and pencil much. My job entails a lot more than the projections, but my handwriting has gotten terrible because we don't really write very much anymore. And so when I write a note with a pen and paper, I look at the handwriting and look, my God, my elementary school teachers would be so angry with me right now.
Cursive writing. People don't even know from cursive writing anymore.
Yeah, I'll freeze like, okay, the Q's the big floppy 2. Yeah, that's right.
Wayne had the advantage of going to PS 148, where elementary writing and what have you was stood out. I went to the same school.
Actually, I went to 149.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's why you have an advantage.
Yes.
You saw 148. We sold at 149. We grew up in Jackson Heights. You grew up in Baltimore, didn't you, my friend?
I did. Suburban Baltimore, but generally Baltimore nonetheless. Towson, Maryland, to be exact, but it's essentially Baltimore.
How'd you get introduced to baseball in the first place?
Well, my grandfather and my dad were both into baseball. My grandfather was an old New Yorker. He grew up, born in 1910, grew up a Yankee fan. He lived down the street from Hank Greenberg growing up. Used to play soccer with him. So he was a big Yankee fan. He saw Ruth and the Musicals and you know, Gehrig and all the old Yankees. So he brought me to games, and so did my dad. So I got a lot of baseball early. My only regret is they both my dad and my grandfather died before they knew I became a baseball writer, and I think they both would have gotten a kick out of it.
I'm sorry.
So that's always been a regret. My grandfather lived to 96, so I can't really complain too much about that. But my dad did die when I was fairly young, and he would have really dug that I write for ESPN.
Oh, I could imagine. Absolutely. My grandfather would have dug this. I think about that all the time. The people I talk to, and that I get to enjoy the passion that he instilled in me. Do you remember your first game? Going to your first game?
The first game I went to, I don't remember because I was too young. But the first game I remember clearly, I do know. That was in 1985. The Orioles were playing the White Sox. It was July 1985. I was 7 years old, and it was the first game I was old enough to remember the events of the game. Clearly, I mean, Mike Boddicker was pitching. It was 5-3, I believe the score was. Tom Seaver was pitching for the White Sox, but I was a little Orioles fan, so he was the bad guy. I didn't really know the significance of Tom Seaver at that point. And it was a lot of fun. And, of course, and after that, 86 and 87, my grandfather started getting season tickets because he was long retired at that point. So then I got to go to baseball games all the time, starting from 8, 9. And I've always loved baseball, and I'm blessed that I get to write about baseball for a living.
Who did you grow up reading? Who were the sports books that you read or sports writers?
Well, in addition to the sabermetric books, I always liked histories. I read every history I could get my hands on. And when I was 7, I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated. And my favorite column, I always loved reading Peter Gammon's columns. He was in Sports Illustrated at the time. And so he was my favorite writer growing up. So when I grew up and I talked to Peter Gammon that he'd mentioned my work, I was always very excited about that. I was a real fanboy, like, oh my God, Peter Gammon knows I exist.
Wow. It's funny. About a year or so ago, I sent Ralph a copy of Bill James's first historical abstract. I told him, I said, keep it in the bathroom. I said, you will always find something to read.
Oh, great book.
It is never ending. Actually, I need to get around to sending him the second one. So, and I'm hopeful that one day Bill James will do a third.
Well,
he hasn't written much since he's been working with the Red Sox.
That's a question I wanted to ask. Wayne, you wanted to ask that question. How much of Bill James were you influenced by, or were you influenced
I loved his writing style, especially because one of the things that he always emphasized is he was a good writer. Sometimes writing about numbers can be very dry, and I've always tried not to write in a very dry manner. I don't really write technical pieces. Obviously I use sabermetrics and I use quite a bit of data, but I try to tell stories and make it actually readable. And I hope that's what it is. I hope my work is readable, but I mean, you never know. But that was always my best part of James. He communicates so well.
Well, anytime one can make the numbers readable, that's a skill, because numbers themselves can be very, very dry. And unless you have the ability to bring it to life and to recognize that they're just a number, just a start, not everything. Doesn't go into making all the decisions. Numbers don't tell you what the heart is, what the health of the player is, the fact that they're humans and they could be hurt and this, that, and the other thing. But baseball is about the only sport where the numbers are close enough that one could play a simulation game based on numbers. Like Wayne and I play a lot of Diamond Mind, and I play...
Oh, I love Diamond Mind. We do a Zips projection disc every year for Diamond Mind.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
well, I'm just curious, with the Zips projections, do you also do ballpark factors, or that's just...
Yeah, I do all the ballpark factors, all the splits, all the projected league factors. I put all that together. So that's
okay.
all...
That's in your projections itself. I don't mean for the Diamond Mind disc. That's just in your. It's in all your projections. Yeah, that's in my projections.
Yeah, and then I translate everything into Diamond Mind for them. Me and their programmer Luke Kramer, we have it down well. I give him a big spreadsheet with all this data, and he puts it all on the disc. And it's a pretty cool disc.
Luke is the best. Luke is the best. He really is. I remember when he was like the man at Diamond Mind, and. When they came out with whatever version it was, it might have been 8, which had the built-in net play, and basically, so like all of a sudden, like, wow, why can't we connect? And he was probably on the phone with every owner of Diamond Mind that was trying net play, and because everybody had to do port forwarding on their router, like no one caught that. But Luke was great. Getting back to Zips, this show is, it's really called New York City Baseball, Past, Present, and Future. So, and Ralph is a Met fan. I'm a Yankee fan. I am the Yankee fan that, as long as the Mets aren't playing the Yankees, I root very hard for the Mets as well. But
and I'm the Yankee fan that worships. I'm the Met fan that worships the Yankees tradition and just the I glow at the pinstripe, the players, but I just can't root for them. I'd root for them if they were playing anybody outside of New York, like Wayne says. But when they're no matter what the standings are, I will not root for the Yankees when they play the Mets. And I'm sure Wayne...
Well, that's understandable.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, Ralph, I just want you to know that Dan projected Matt Harvey to go 10-6 this year, only 10 victories.
Well, that's
Jacob
part because
DeGrom,
there is an injury risk in him. I actually did a feature because Zips factors in that there is an injury risk. He's still only a year removed from major elbow surgery, essentially. So that's part of the reason. It projects him to have a 2.91 ERA, which of course is excellent.
Does.
So it's mostly a record thing, and it's also taking into consideration that the Mets probably aren't going to have the best offense in the league. I mean, you remember the offense before Cespedes came in July.
Right. They're going to have a terrific team, and I think at this point, after all of that Boros pitch count garbage, the whole thing for the playoffs, went into the World Series, I think you could put the Harvey injury thing behind you as much as you can with any other pitcher. And I don't know if the pitchers who have had the surgery are prone to being more safe in the future than the pitchers that haven't had the surgery. So I wouldn't put injury. I mean, anything can happen to anyone. You can take a batted ball off a knee, but I disagree. 10-6. I mean, if you'd have said 15-18, that, or 10-18, that would be more like it, because I think he's going to pitch the innings. Not that I.
Well, Zips is frightened of pitchers generally, so it's conservative both with the innings and both with the unknown of the team run support. So it only projects as an average eight pitchers to win more than 15 games on average. So it's not like Harvey's behind half the league or anything. I think the ERA is probably the most important of the projections because it does do a lot of normalizing out of the defense and the like. I like Harvey, and I just did in the ESPN magazine baseball preview, one of the things I did is I projected the value of the Mets rotation to the Mets over the next years until they hit free agency, because they all project very well. And I forget the exact bottom line number, but having all those young pitchers under contract, to get that performance, they'd have to pay something like $300 million in free agency to sign players that good.
Right.
So it's a very positive thing about
the envelope is very slim. If they're going to win, put together 2, maybe 3 in a row or whatever, they better do it really quickly, because keeping it all together, and yes, would you say long-term injuries, this, that, and the other thing, that's why it hurt me the other day when they didn't get anything for Tejada, and they saved a few bucks. And if they shouldn't be into the let's save a few bucks mode at this point. They should be into we'll spend it all. Let's because we're getting it back. We've got the TV revenue. We've got New York City. We've got everything going for us. They should be trying to just make hay while hay is being made. Because what an incredible pitching staff. Do you ever remember, either of you guys remember, I know it's all potential, but I've never seen a young pitching staff, sans maybe the Seaver, Nolan Ryan, Gentry, those guys. Potential is incredible. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree. I think it's one of the best rotations going forward, and I think it's going to be the best young rotation in baseball over the next 5 years. I think the Mets' problem really is their ownership. Ownership is a serious issue for the team, and I think it's the thing most standing in their way of becoming one of the top, very, very top teams in baseball. And they're going to be a really good team this year too. Don't get me wrong, but ownership is an issue. The Wilpons have leveraged themselves up to their eyeballs. A ton of money to pretty much everybody, from government to creditors. I would love to see the Mets have new ownership someday.
Every Mets fan in New York would love to see that. Now, I mean, I personally, I think the Mets are actually starting the year light years ahead offensively and both as far as their bullpen depth goes than last year. So I see them doing well. And last year, actually, Ralph will tell you, I predicted 88 wins for them. That was my prediction. But the other thing
I did. I'm a Met fan.
The other thing.
Yeah, I had them above the Marlins, but I did not have them winning the division. I had them at 82 wins.
Okay.
Can you
now,
tell me? Can any of us ever be objective when it comes to our own teams?
Well, people always say I'm mean to the Orioles.
Wait a second. I was very objective last year. I said, and I was wrong. I was off. But last year I said that I wasn't sure that if the Yankees would even finish at 500. I thought they'd have 79, 80 wins.
Well, that's possible. I had them pretty low. The thing about the Yankees is they always seem to be kind of on the edge of disaster. You look at some of their older players that they've been counting on, and you always think, man, the wheels could come off this team very quickly. But it's never quite happened.
Well, I feel a lot more positive about the Yankees this year than I did last year. Last year, I didn't think they'd finish at 500. I have to say I feel a little bit more positive this year. Speaking of which, let me ask you something. Luis Severino, do you think he's gonna be all he's hyped up to be?
I think Severino's the most dependable pitcher in the rotation right now. There's no question in my mind. He's that talented. He destroyed the minor leagues. He was excellent in the majors, and he's essentially one of the few on the team that doesn't have a serious injury question right now. I think he's really the most dependable starter in the rotation. I mean, Tanaka overall is a more established pitcher, but don't you always worry about Tanaka's arm? I mean, he's always picking through some kind of torn ligament.
No, I always do, and I concur with what you said about Severino. The reason I asked is because I still wanted to get soothed a little bit because I did draft Severino a little high in my Diamond Mine draft. I reached a little. I drafted him a little early. So
well, if you see the projection, he projected quite solidly. So if you play the projection league, at least it'll be okay.
No, we play on based on last year's stats. We don't do projection.
The seasonal dip.
Okay. Do you think Corey Seager is everything everybody predicts he is? Or will be?
I love watching him play. I think he's going to be excellent. We're kind of blessed again with like another huge run of just amazing young shortstops. I mean, it's not just Seager. I mean, you have Lindor and Correa, and you're going to have Garcia in Milwaukee, and
Addison Russell.
Yeah. It's an amazing time, like it was 20 years ago when, A-Rod and Jeter and Garcia Parra and Tejada were all breaking in. So it's really fun to see that. So it's very exciting.
Okay. I'm going to pick your brain on one more player, okay? Or leading up to our Diamond Mine draft last year, I kept telling my son that Miguel Sano is going to be just like Miguel Cabrera, okay? And I was going to pick him pretty early, and my son snatched him on me. Do you agree with me that Sano as a hitter does he remind you of Cabrera?
I wouldn't actually say Cabrera. I think Cabrera is a more complete, well-rounded hitter than Sano is. Sano is a player, though, he's going to have just crazy power. I mean, he's going to hit 40 home runs multiple times in the majors. But he's never going to hit like 320, 330. He's going to strike out too much for that. But he is going to be an imposing power hitter. I think his best seasons, he could put up Jose Bautista seasons, maybe.
Okay. Well, I mean, Miguel Cabrera struck out quite. He struck out and didn't walk as much also in his early years. But that's that was just who he reminded me of when I saw him on TV. I was like, wow, this guy. Like, look at this big, huge guy, and incredible bat, incredible power.
His power is incredible. He's got Stanton-esque power.
Okay.
The question, of course,
before I ask you for some good deals, fantasy-wise or projection-wise, on the Mets and the Yankees, I just want to ask you, because you're an Oriole fan, and your take on Buck Showalter, who's a former New York Yankee manager, and a lot of people think that maybe the Yankees would have been better off keeping Buck Showalter the way things turned out. I think he was after Torrey, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he was before Torrey.
Oh, he was before. Okay, then no, that wouldn't have been better off. But I wonder how they'd be under him now as opposed to Girardi. But what effect has he had a positive effect? Obviously, took the Orioles up.
He's a good manager for the organization. Sometimes different managers work better in different positions. You look at Joe Torre, he was kind of the perfect manager for the Yankees. Because the Yankees didn't really need anyone to push the team. The Yankees always needed managers that would just keep the machine running. And that's harder than it sounds. I mean, it sounds like something very simple, but just keeping all these big stars playing well, getting along fairly well on the field, that's what Torrey was excellent at, keeping the team from killing each other, keeping the team playing well. And so Torrey was a really good manager for the Yankees.
Press too, keeping
the press
away
brutal
from the players in Yankees.
And Torrey wasn't in New York to be some sort of genius tactical manager. He was in there really literally to manage the people, and he did a very good job. Torrey was really about the perfect manager for the Yankees over that time stretch, I think.
Right. Did you ever
I think Joe Walters
meet him, just out of curiosity? Did you get a chance to meet him?
I have. I met him very briefly. I haven't really gotten to say anything of use, unfortunately. I think he would have been better than Showalter would have been long term in New York. I mean, can you see Showalter getting along with the New York press for a decade?
Oh no.
This is true.
But
now,
I can't see anybody getting along with the New York press for a decade.
When it comes to managers, let's just say are there any managers that you would actually put a number to and say, well, this guy is worth 1 or 2 wins above replacement? Are there any managers that stand out to you that you think really actually steal a couple of games a year? They are as managers.
I think Joe Madden does, because Joe Madden is a very imaginative manager, and he really thinks outside the box. Now, putting a number on a manager, that's a really difficult thing. I'm not sure we can do that with any kind of specificity, but Joe Madden is my favorite manager in baseball right now. Some teams, he wouldn't have been as good, say, managing the early 2000s Yankees as Joe Torre would, but right now he's been in good situations both in Tampa Bay and Chicago. I think they're both really good situations for him, and he's probably my favorite manager to watch in the game.
Speaking of Joe Madden, what do you think about the pitcher batting eighth?
Pardon?
Speaking of Joe Madden, what do you think about the pitcher batting eighth?
I think it's actually smart. You do get to pitcher a few more at-bats a year, but then you also have your leadoff hitters not having a pitcher in front of them. There's a lot of research, and the differences are marginal, but it's backed up that there's a very good argument for hitting the pitcher eighth.
How about defense in the infield, based on computer projections of where the ball's going to be hit? How does that change things? Is there a skill to that? Can they overmanage with that? What's your take on that?
You can always overmanage if you take stats too seriously, because defensive numbers, we have a lot more data to look at now, but we also have to remember it's very volatile. You don't want to get excited about what a player's defensive numbers are over a 2-month period, for example, because the measurements are not that precise. But they do tell us a lot of information that we didn't really have that same specificity 20 years ago. Now, when they chart every ball, because if you look at MLB StatCast, they have 10 terabytes of data they collect from every game. 10 terabytes. That's a ridiculous amount of information that they're catching on every single pitch, every player's location. And teams, as we go on, are going to be able to utilize that better. And more accurately scout other teams and more accurately use players in the best situation. And as we've been seeing things like the shift has kind of changed how left-handed hitters have to play. So this data, it's always very interesting, and the teams that use it the best, not necessarily the most, but the teams that use it the best will get a bump out of it.
Yeah. Hey, there's one saying that I never agreed with. It said, speed never slumps. I don't think that's true. I think that speed does slump based on guys' minor injuries, the way the team is run in terms of freedom on the base paths, this, that, and the other thing.
Speed does slump. Yeah, that's one of those. Sometimes these bits of conventional wisdom turn out to be true. Sometimes they don't. Really, everybody slumps. Power hitters, fast hitters. It's just the nature of the game.
Arm strength goes down. Pulled muscles.
Yeah, I mean, even fielding slumps. You see a guy have a little bad month and then a really good month. Now one conventional. It's always fun when a bit of conventional wisdom is confirmed. I always think the old saying that you don't make the first out or the third out at third. That's actually true, and so it's always fun when some of the old acorns prove to be accurate.
Right, or like if you walk the first guy in the inning, is it 80% chance he's going to score?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous. Yeah, you don't walk the leadoff hitter, especially if he's Ricky.
Well, speaking of these these old sayings, you said you read all the Bill James abstracts. I remember the first abstract that I had. I believe it was 1984. And Bill James was in love with Brian Downing as a leadoff hitter.
Brian Downing, the leadoff hitter. That was fun. That was a cool experiment.
With the Angels.
But it seems as though it seems as though in the same respect though, as though he felt as though that Downing was like a better leadoff hitter than a Willie Wilson or a Vince Coleman, guys who didn't have as good an on-base percentage. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I always remember Coleman hurting the Mets, and I always remember Willie Wilson hurting the Yankees. Like, okay, so maybe the on-base percentage wasn't as high, but they got to second base, they got to third on a single. If they were on first, they scored on a double.
But think about it. Think about it this way: the leadoff hitter, he's going to be on base when like the third and fourth hitters are up, and those are the hitters that need the least bit of assistance for you to advance bases. Brian Downing, I mean, when he was hitting leadoff, he scored 110 runs that year. So I guarantee you, a lot of people thought Brian Downing was going to kill him. Now, obviously, Brian Downing wouldn't have been as good a leadoff hitter as Ricky Henderson or Tim Raines. But he was really good in that role.
And sometimes the team has to go with what they have, too.
Yeah, you never get perfect archetypes, so you had to make the most of your talent.
Right.
Speaking of Tim Raines,
that's why a general manager that can balance things is really respected especially by me, anyway, because it's not easy to work out. And Alderson, I'm going to tell you, I've already given Wilpon a hall pass on behalf of the show for the whole year because he re-signed Cespedes. So he's being a little cheap. That's cool. Alderson.
It actually worked out a little here because they actually got Cespedes back on a really good contract for them. They didn't have to give him, 8 years, $160 million or something.
Right. Well, I meant with the Tejada thing, but absolutely, that worked out very well. But I know that Wilpon wasn't behind that. Alderson was behind that, and he saw the way things were going. And instead of, like last year, addressing the shortstop, second base situation right away, he just signs Astrulo and Walker really quickly, takes a lot of the pressure off the day-to-day nagging him, what are you going to do about this, what are you going to do about that. And then when they signed Cespedes, I honestly think Conforto is about to break out. And
I think so too. he's been one of the players I've been urging people to draft in fantasy. I've taken him in a number of mock
drafts. That's what we want to hear. That's good.
Yeah, I like Conforto a lot. I think early on, I think you'll see Lagares get some at-bats out there, but I think by the time we get to the midseason, he's going to have the left field job pretty much to himself.
Right, and they're talking now about introducing him to first base. Halfway through spring training, 2 years later, they're introducing him to first base, which is a great idea if you can make him versatile, give him some at-bats, due to slumps against lefties. This could be just what they need. But, boy, it sure took him a long time to come around to that. And if you're going to think, well, wouldn't that be nice, maybe in the off-season you could have talked about it, maybe brought him in early or whatever. I don't know. The guys that run things. I like Lagares, too. If he could stay healthy, come back and have a good year. This is, as a Met fan, 50-some-odd years, they've never been odds-on favorites to win anything but a golf tournament in Vegas at the end of the year. So,
yeah, I've always liked Sandy Alderson. He's an interesting figure kind of in baseball history because he was Billy Beane's mentor in Oakland. So he never really got the full credit for starting off the A's down the Moneyball path because that wasn't just Beane, that was Alderson too. And I mean,
Alderson built him in '89, though. He did get praise.
Yeah, he did get praise for that. And he's been doing all this while fighting through cancer. I mean, he's been having chemo. He had like 2 months of chemo during all this. So Sandy Alderson.
I knew he was fighting cancer, but I didn't know he was going through chemo and all that as well.
I believe it was chemo. I don't know if it was. It might have been radiation.
It was chemo. I think it was both. I think it was both, actually. Yeah, I believe. Don't quote me, but he certainly has been. But either one is just not easy. Either so. And it's funny. I mean. It's funny how, when you look back at what the Mets were when Sandy Alderson took over, I mean, his first job was to get rid of the bloated payroll. I mean, when you think about it, he's done a masterful job. There's a guy I work with who's a huge Mets fan, and I remember telling him, like, a few years ago, I said, listen, relax. I said, Alderson is the perfect guy for this job because you can tell he can take the heat. He's not rattled by the pressure. He's not rattled by the New York press, and he's going to go ahead and do these unpopular but necessary things. And, yes, they arrived kind of like a year before everybody expected, but, it's pretty
they were on the
gone
upswing,
according
really.
to plan. Yes.
Yeah.
But
fans
what about the Nationals? I'm sorry. What about the Nationals?
I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year. For
yeah,
sure.
I can't imagine them being as bad. I can't imagine.
Yeah, Matt Williams, he just lost so much control of that team. It was embarrassing almost at times. But you look at some of their talent on their team, and they should have been so much better than they were last year.
Exactly. I mean, you got Bryce Harper. You're going to have Rendon coming back. You're going to have Rendon coming back.
Scherzer and Strasburg
I was about to say you got Scherzer and Strasburg at the top of the rotation. I like that kid Joe Ross.
Zimmerman.
No, Zimmerman is gone.
Right.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Zimmerman is gone, but I like that kid Joe Ross. And Gio Gonzalez, if he can stay healthy, I mean, I think a lot of people are forgetting how good they were the year before last year, and the years before that.
And even in a disaster season of 2015, they still won 83 games, which isn't bad in a disaster season.
Not at all. No. Actually, when your season's considered a disaster, when you only win 83 games, that says something about the team itself.
No, I agree. It does. But it's always interesting because fans are never patient. When you're talking about Sandy Alderson making tough moves, I always think of the Cubs and the Astros in similar situations where they also had to make very tough decisions, and fans got all mad about the whole thing. I remember when Epstein came over to the Cubs, and people were like, well, the Ricketts aren't going to ever pay anybody. They're just there to keep payroll down and lose. And I was like, no, it just doesn't make sense to spend now. But clearly they have John Lester, Jason Hayward. They try to get David Price. They're spending now because they took the long road. And taking the long road is generally what pays off. And that's what we've seen in New York.
Yes, but you know what? Now that the Yankees, I won't say they're taking a long road, but they're definitely taking a slower road. And I'm like one of the few Yankee fans that, you know, years ago I said, you know what? Let's take the hit. Let's suck for a couple of years. You know, it's kind of what we need to do to build a foundation to make another run. But of course, you know, it's tough to do in New York. And also, what they did was also
in New York.
Yeah, well,
you get a lot more leash in Houston than you get in New York.
Yeah, and the thing is too, what the Yankees did all those years when they were successful, it was also part of their business model. That's what drove them. I just read today they're worth $3.4 billion. That's what drove them to become the most valuable baseball franchise, and I think they're the second most valuable sports franchise, but I'm not sure.
Probably behind the Cowboys. I would think the Cowboys are the most valuable.
And not only the value itself, but what made them a ton of money over the years. But
we've got to take a moment just to tell you what Jerry Brown said. I'm sure you guys all read it. The owner of the Cowboys, Jerry Brown. He says
Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones, I'm sorry. You can disregard all that stuff, he says, about head injuries, even though the NFL already signed off on it. He says, I think that stuff is overrated. That's what he says.
Well, maybe he got hit on the head too many times.
I know. You think the guys with the most money in the world, the Trumps, and not just to pick on him, some of the stupidest mothers I ever heard in my life, some of the most out-of-touch people with, what's he trying to do? Just lessen the blow of what eventually these guys are going to sue to the point where you got 30-year-old guys walking around, don't know what city they're in, what their middle name is anymore, and in the name of entertainment. And these owners, they have to be complicit for all this. They know what's going on head injury-wise. Give baseball a lot of credit. They make adjustments. When that catcher thing happened, the slide into second base. I'm old school. I like things to stay the same. But there are certain things when you fly over the base into a guy, that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a growth thing. I love baseball. I don't want to see players get hurt. I don't think that's cool. I mean, it's exciting to see a bang play, but if these guys are going to have just long-term consequences, painful recoveries, I mean, I love baseball and baseball players too much to wish that on anybody.
Right. And they love you, by the way. I want you to know.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't like the projections, and I hear about it. But
do you hear about a person?
I can't name names, but I do frequently hear, especially from the team. I have to get more pushback from teams about projections sometimes. But I'll always say, "Oh, it's the computer. It's not my fault." Possible deniability.
I'm sure
Don't
the fantasy owners, after they draft and then they read your column, after they draft, they're going to stick with what it was. They'll defend their position no matter what. You find that to be true with a lot of folks in this world. They make a mistake.
Oh, I will. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? They'll remember every single one of my projections that don't turn out true. They'll remember every single one of those. They won't remember any of the ones I got right.
Right. Well, Wayne remembers who the Mets should have gotten to play shortstop. I played that game.
Ralph was going on and on a couple of years ago that the Mets should have signed Stephen Drew when he was a free agent. And I kept saying, no, 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 no. So,
that's true. I can't deny it. So, but it worked out.
Well, Ralph is very free with baseball owners' money.
Yes,
well, it's
I
always
am.
better to spend someone else's money.
Absolutely.
Always.
We're unabashed. I make no apologies. You know why? Because they're free with my money. If it costs $15 to park an automobile and they get 10 of it, you know what I'm saying? And they're bringing in oodles of bucks, and no one has ever lost on a baseball franchise. And the ones that don't make money are supported by the ones that do, the luxury tax thing, which is what keeps the A's going. As delightful as it is to watch them grow with nothing and Moneyball and all that, it's still not fair. There's still no balance. When you play Diamond Mine, you look for balancing. You look for a fair draft. There's nothing fair in baseball. It's all business. It's all money, and it is what it is. But yet we still go out. I still can't wait for opening day.
But you can look back and you can find like the Al Spalding quotes from like 1880 about how players today only care about the money and it's all a business now. So it's funny how things are always always stay the same to an extent, I think.
Right. There's a book by Giovanni or whatever his name is, the commissioner, the late former commissioner. He wrote a book about players in the 50s, and he says, we would have played for nothing. Well, guess what? Those were the guys that were organizing the unions in the 50s, and they didn't like playing for $6,000 a year. They were fighting for money. No, they wouldn't have played. Sal Magli in 1948 was in the Mexican League, trying to make a few extra dollars. It's always been a business. I understand that. That's what I like most about fantasy ball.
Yeah, and if I'm a player, I want me to get the money, not the owner.
Right. Oh, I
really?
certainly don't. I certainly don't blame the players, and I root for the players to get paid and compensated, because I know how it was when they were held captive in an organization that they couldn't get out of. They were behind.
Have you ever read John Hellier's book, Lords of the Realm, about baseball's labor union? It's a good read.
No.
He got lots of great interviews. It's a fun read.
Thumbed through it. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it as the real Bible of it. Hey, thank you guys. This has been terrific. Will you come back as a guest more than once?
I'd be happy to. I'm always up to talk about baseball. That's the fun part of my job. It's the part I'm not paid for. It's just going around talking all over the place. I love to talk baseball because it's really such an important part of my life.
Beautiful. I love that spirit. And Wayne, thanks for another great time. I so much enjoy your company, as you know.
Thank you. And Dan, thank you again for coming on. This was great.
No problem. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And send me a link on Twitter and stuff so I can make sure people go listen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we will also tell you what a pleasure it was to have you and what relaxed company you are. We're just three guys talking ball. And I enjoy doing that an awful lot.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, guys. You all have a good
night.
Okay.
Hey, Wayne, sign off for us.
No, you sign off. All I'm going to do is say
goodnight.
No,
man, you sign off.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. This is New York City Baseball Past, Present, and Future, and I want to thank our guest, Dan Szymborski, and thank you, and Ralph Tyko, my co-host, and have a good night. And opening day is just a couple of weeks away.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Good night.